What started as a behind-the-scenes dispute on a movie set has now turned into one of Hollywood's most uncomfortable public trials. This isn't just about Blake Lively versus a co-star. It's about how a private conflict spiraled into a legal spectacle, dragging friendships, reputations, and even one of the most carefully protected celebrity images into the spotlight. As court filings became headlines and private messages became public evidence, the fallout spread far beyond the people actually named in the lawsuit. Careers were questioned, trust was strained, and Hollywood was reminded of one brutal truth. Once a lawsuit goes public, no one controls the narrative anymore. Before this case ever reached a courtroom, Blake Lively's reputation in Hollywood was carefully built and largely untouchable. She wasn't just known as an actress, she was positioned as a brand. From Gossip Girl to major studio films, Blake had cultivated an image that mixed talent, likability, and industry trust. She was seen as professional, media savvy, and someone studios felt safe backing. That's why It Ends With Us mattered so much. The project wasn't just another role, it was a high-profile adaptation with a massive built-in audience and serious emotional weight. Expectations were high, both commercially and culturally. The film was positioned as meaningful, sensitive, and socially relevant, placing extra pressure on everyone involved to get it right. Behind the scenes, the production brought together strong personalities, creative control, and enormous public interest. And when tensions reportedly emerged, they didn't stay contained. What should have been a prestige project quickly became something else entirely, the starting point of a conflict that would later spill far beyond the film itself.
They focused on proving her case in the court of law.
According to court filings, the conflict didn't begin with a single explosive moment. It built slowly, behind closed doors, during production. What was initially described as creative and professional disagreements allegedly evolved into something more serious. Blake Lively claims that certain on-set interactions crossed boundaries and created an environment she believed was inappropriate and unsafe. From her perspective, those concerns were raised internally and not resolved.
I think he feels like he wants the truth to come out, but you never feel good when people are being mean and not saying, things that are kind. So.
On the other side, Justin Baldoni has firmly denied those allegations. His legal response frames the situation very differently, describing the issues as standard production conflicts that were later reframed once tensions escalated. Baldoni's team argues that disagreements over tone, control, and decision-making were mischaracterized after the fact, turning professional friction into legal accusations. This is the critical turning point of the entire case. What might have remained a private dispute between collaborators instead entered the legal system. Once lawyers were involved, every email, text message, and meeting suddenly mattered. Internal conversations became potential evidence. Intentions were questioned. Narratives hardened. And from that moment on, the conflict stopped being about resolving a problem and became about proving a version of events. That shift is what transformed a behind-the-scenes disagreement into a lawsuit with consequences far beyond the film itself. At the center of this case are two very different versions of the same working relationship. Blake Lively's lawsuit alleges that during production, boundaries were crossed and that certain behavior created a hostile and unsafe work environment. Her legal filings argue that these issues were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern that affected her ability to work comfortably on set. She also claims that when concerns were raised, the response was inadequate, allowing the situation to escalate rather than resolve. Justin Baldoni's response rejects those claims entirely. His defense maintains that no harassment occurred and that all interactions were professional and appropriate. Baldoni's legal team argues that the accusations are a misrepresentation of normal creative disagreements and workplace tension that can arise on large productions. From their perspective, what's being framed as misconduct was actually conflict over creative control, tone, and leadership, not personal wrongdoing. Both sides rely heavily on documentation. Messages, emails, and internal communications are used to support each narrative. Where Blake's team points to language and context they say show harm, Baldoni's team highlights the same materials to argue consent, professionalism, and misunderstanding. This is why the case has become so complex. It isn't built around a single clear-cut incident, but competing interpretations of the same moments. And legally, that makes the outcome far less predictable, because the court isn't deciding how people felt, but what can be proven. Even before the trial began, This dispute was no longer confined to courtrooms or private meetings. Key filings, including emails and text messages, were leaked or unsealed, giving the media direct access to sensitive details. Headlines quickly amplified every claim and counterclaim, turning legal documents into public narratives. Tabloids and entertainment outlets framed the story with dramatic angles, highlighting tension, alleged misconduct, and celebrity involvement. What might have been a contained professional disagreement became a full-blown media spectacle. Every statement, every leaked conversation was dissected and debated online. This public exposure had a ripple effect. Fans speculated, social media trended with opinions, and private relationships, including friendships between stars, suddenly became part of the story. The case stopped being about workplace conflicts and instead became about public perception, branding, and reputation management. Once the cameras and headlines entered the equation, controlling the narrative became nearly impossible. Taylor Swift's name entered the trial unexpectedly through private messages she exchanged with Blake Lively. These texts, initially intended as personal conversations between friends, were unsealed as part of the legal proceedings. Suddenly, Swift, a global superstar known for protecting her privacy, was pulled into a dispute she never intended to be public. The media quickly highlighted these exchanges, framing them as evidence of shifting loyalties, tension, or influence. Headlines suggested that even Swift's private opinions could affect the dynamics of the case, creating a narrative that extended far beyond the courtroom. For Swift, the fallout was immediate. Fans and critics debated her role, questioning her friendship and her response. What was meant to be private became public, and her carefully cultivated image of discretion and control was suddenly vulnerable. The case illustrated a harsh reality of celebrity culture. Even indirect involvement can carry real consequences when personal communications are exposed. In short, what should have remained a personal friendship now became a public symbol of the stakes and risks of high-profile legal battles. As the trial and leaks unfolded, public perception of both Blake Lively and Taylor Swift began to shift. For Blake, the once polished Hollywood image of professionalism and grace started to fracture. Headlines focused on conflict, drama, and leaked communications, painting her as combative and embroiled in chaos rather than a respected creative force. Social media amplified every misstep, and fans began questioning her judgment, both on set and in how she handled friendships. Taylor Swift, though not directly part of the lawsuit, also felt the backlash. Her private messages with Blake being made public challenged her carefully maintained reputation for privacy and control. Fans debated her loyalty, her judgment, and even her role in the narrative, creating tension around her public persona that she had spent years cultivating. The optics of the trial made one thing clear. In high-profile legal battles, the courtroom isn't the only place where consequences are felt. Reputation, trust, and public perception can be just as fragile and just as damaging as any legal verdict. What started as a private dispute had now turned into a spectacle affecting the careers and images of multiple A-list celebrities. Beyond the drama, the Blake Lively trial exposes a broader truth about Hollywood and celebrity culture. Lawsuits between public figures aren't just legal battles, they're high-stakes exercises in reputation management. Privacy becomes almost impossible to protect, and even indirect involvement can have far-reaching consequences. As Taylor Swift's experience shows, this case also highlights the power of media and PR in shaping narratives. Leaks, selective headlines, and social media speculation can sometimes matter more than the facts themselves. Careers, friendships, and public trust are vulnerable to interpretation and exposure, often before the court has even made a decision. Ultimately, the trial isn't just about who was right or wrong on set. It's a cautionary tale about how legal disputes, once public, ripple through relationships, brands, and public perception, reminding everyone in Hollywood that in the age of instant headlines and social media, no one controls the story entirely. In the end, this isn't just Blake Lively's story or even Taylor Swift's. It's a warning for anyone whose private conflicts could become public spectacles.